Alright, so we've got an '08 Honda Odyssey. We're going to go check out. The customer dropped it off a few minutes ago. And they're complaining of some brake problems, a lot of vibration happening, shuddering when they hit the brakes, and also do a general check over. So we're going to check this thing out and see what we can find. Well, that doesn't sound good. Okay, you hear that? Sounds like it's coming from underneath the vehicle on the passenger side. Now maybe we can try to pinpoint that in a little bit. Alright, so this one has some symptoms under the hood. It's got thumping, thudding, vibrating, some groaning going on, especially when you start the engine cold. It really sounds terrible, and when you head down the road you really know that there's a problem. So what I discovered after inspection is the front motor mount was separated. And not only that, but it had two other motor mounts that failed, the passenger side mount and the rear mount. I think we're going to start with the rear mount. It's accessible underneath the vehicle, so if you are doing this at home in a garage, if you don't have a lift, you're going to have to get the car up on jacks and get it securely jacked up. Make sure you're safe. Please, this is at your own risk if you're making these repairs. I'm here just to help you along or help give you some solutions to some problems, but you are definitely at your own risk. If you don't have much experience, you might want to get some professional help, somebody to guide you along, hands-on, if you feel like you need that. With that, let's go ahead and get underneath the vehicle and take a look at that rear motor mount and see about replacing it first. Then I'll go to the front and the side mounts, because both of those are kind of we're going to be working together getting both of those replaced. Try to get access to the rear mount bolt through the wheel well. So we're going to take this wheel off, 22 millimeter lug nut. $17 millimeter 1/2 inch socket and ratchet. And I'm just going to tell you right now that you may have to put some gorilla torque on this thing to get it broke loose. It's a pretty tight space. You can't get a long handle ratchet in here, but you can get a short handle one in here and get it broken. It was extremely tight. I almost couldn't get it, but it did finally start moving. Okay, now that I've got the bolt broken loose from underneath with a ratchet and socket by hand, because trying to do it this way with a long extension and impact, there's just too much flex in a long extension, and it simply won't break a high torque bolt loose. So you'll have to get just a socket and ratchet, get right up on it, up close and personal, to try to break that thing loose with either a wrench or a 1/2 inch socket and ratchet, 17 millimeter. So let me see if I can get this attached now and get it run out. And yes, it will do it. Get my impact wrench positioned a little bit better. Okay, so as you can see, that bolt is out now, so I'm going to try to go back underneath and grab that. And another thing is, I've got the engine and transmission, I've got it supported on a jack stand with a 4x4 post. You can use whatever you need to use, just be careful. If you have a transmission stand that is adjustable, that's the ideal way to do it, something that gives you a lot of good support from up underneath in order to support the engine and get the pressure off of that rear mount. The more weight and pressure you can take off of it, the easier it's going to be to get that thing out of there. Okay, let's see here.
there we go. Let's see if I got enough pressure off of this. Still pretty tight. I'm gonna try to jack up the engine a little bit. Oh yeah, that was good. Came right out now. See, that took all the pressure off of that transverse bolt and it slipped right out. The next step, now that that's loose from the engine bracket, and right there's, all right, there's the engine bracket, and then there's the mount assembly, and the mount is held in place on the engine subframe with 4 bolts, 1, 2, and then on the other side of the exhaust 3 and 4. So we're going to get those out next. Looks like a 14 millimeter. Still using the 1/2 inch air impact with a 14 millimeter and a 6 inch extension. All right, so that's how long those are. Kind of long. All right, so I can't get to this one, so I'll have to get a wrench or a swivel socket on that and see if I can manipulate that one. And get to these other ones on this side, I believe. Yeah. You can see some corrosion coming out of there, and it's a smoking hole. And get this one out. I would recommend spraying a little WD-40 or something in there to help kill the corrosion that's building up inside those bolt holes. All right, so with this 4th bolt that's right above the exhaust pipe, just so I don't have to drop the exhaust out of the way, I'm going to use a long handle 14 millimeter wrench to break it loose, and then I'll see about working it out from there. So let me see if I can get this thing broke loose. And man, it's hard to keep the camera on this thing and do it in one hand. Let's see. All right, here we go. Oh, that was not tight. That's good. It wasn't frozen up. Corrosion had not locked this thing up, so that's good. So it's a lot easier to break free than I was anticipating it to be. So now I'm going to get a ratcheting wrench, 14 millimeter, and zip this thing off a little bit quicker. Got the ratcheting 14 millimeter wrench, and we'll get that going here. There we go. All right, so that's dropped out of the way. I should be able to grab this mount. If I can do this one-handed, I don't know. We'll see. All right, so there's one thing I forgot to do is there's a little heat shield on the front of that mount with a 10 millimeter bolt, and I forgot to remove that. I think I got it broke loose. I hope I did. Yeah. Okay. Save that bolt. All right, that should allow this thing to come on up out of there. You can work this out without loosening the engine bracket or rack and pinion lines. It is a little tough, but it should work its way out. There we go. Let's take a look. So here's the results. I would call that a bad mount, without a doubt. Probably yeah, practically torn all the way through. So this thing was doing nothing. I'll probably tear that right on out of there. just like that. All right, so here's the new one. I'll lay these down here. Basically, you just want to compare the two. Make sure that you have the right product and everything looks correct, especially with aftermarket parts. You can never be too sure about the quality of some of the aftermarket parts. This is an aftermarket. So far it looks pretty good, and it looks like the overall dimensions are the same. It's got that same kind of a forward lean to it, and you always want to make sure you're going to install it the correct way. And if you notice, that's the hole where the little heat shield 10mm bolt went in, so obviously it's going to go in right there on this new one. And you got the lean towards the engine right there, so we're going to put it back in that exact configuration. And we'll take this off, that way you can see what this isolator, the rubber isolator, actually looks like when it's intact versus when it's not. You get the two legs of the isolator bushing in the downward position because you're just going to have the weight of the engine against it. So I've seen bushings that were actually installed 90 degrees or 180 degrees out of position. That definitely would end up with as a failure if you were to install it. So this one's okay.
After slipping the engine mount into position, you'll be ready for the next step. Take the large bolt, I call it the transverse mount bolt, and slide it through the hole to join the mount and the bracket together. Just get the thread started, don't tighten it up. And at that point you'll be ready for the remaining bolts. Now here's where an alignment tool comes in handy to align the bolt holes up. That way you can get all 4 bolts started relatively easy before you start tightening this engine mount down to the subframe. It's not necessary to use thread locker, just go ahead and get the bolts started in there, but just be mindful that you're screwing this into an aluminum threaded part, so don't over torque these bolts when you do tighten them down. Once you have all the bolts installed loosely, go ahead and tighten the 4 bottom ones, then move to the heat shield bolt, which is a 10mm, and at this point lower the engine down to put weight on the engine mount and tighten the transverse bolt. If you're moving on to part 2 video for the 2 front mounts, leave that transverse bolt loose so the engine will pivot easier when you jack it up for the 2 front mounts. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next episode.